Hi, I'm Tot. Welcome to the Horror Corner, and today I want to talk about Midsommar. Now, I'm going to give you a brief summary. There are some trigger warnings, so we will be discussing murder, we will be discussing SA, we will be discussing depression, survivor's guilt. If none of that sounds appealing to you, please feel free to leave. I appreciate you staying this long. Also, if you watched my last Horror Corner, um, yes, the content has definitely changed. I think a speed paint is a lot more visually pleasing than me waxing on and on while trying to avoid the camera lens. I'm so awkward on camera. This is much better for me. Also, spoilers. So, let's go on to the summary. Midsommar follows the absolutely tragic story of Dani, a poor girl that has lost her entire family, is stuck in an emotionally distant relationship, and now has an entire cult looking to get her to join them. When you first meet Dani, she's struggling with not one, but two relationships in her life. Her relationship with her sister, who has severe mental illness, and her relationship with her boyfriend. You see, Dani's boyfriend, Christian, while most people paint him as the main antagonist of the movie, which I do not think is completely fair, is a very emotionally distant man who falls in the category of people that stay in relationships they're unhappy with because they're afraid of being alone. This is something that's incredibly common and incredibly heartbreaking. People that stay unhappy because they don't want to face the world by themselves. People that have a fear of being alone more than they fear of living out the rest of their days unfulfilled. How he copes with being unhappy in this relationship is essentially shutting himself off emotionally to Dani. Dani is scared of being emotional around Christian because she knows he won't understand. She fears that her having emotion, expressing that, is going to push him away more and more. It's very sad to see a woman going through such distress, unable to rely on her partner because her partner has closed himself off. While that's happening, she then has to deal with her sister, who leaves her a very ominous email to which Dani can't get a hold of anyone, only to find out that her mother, father, and sister have all died, her sister committing a murder-suicide. After this, Dani is, of course, completely devastated, highly traumatized, and one of the most haunting scenes of this movie that I feel like isn't discussed enough is you see Dani wailing, emotionally distraught, distressed, next to Christian, and he robotically rubs her shoulder and back as she screams and cries, realizing her entire family and life has been ripped away from her through no fault of her own. He has this blank stare on his face. He's not even looking at her. It's as if he's dissociating from the moment as the camera pans into a shot of the window. Time passes and Dani and Christian are still together, either through guilt Christian feels about wanting to leave her now that she is completely alone, or, once again, his fear of being alone, keeping her there even though they both are unfulfilled. Christian's friend Pele grew up in a commune in Sweden and invites Christian and their two other mutual friends to go with him back to the Midsommar festival, a festival they have every single year. Mind you, they are only about a week from going, and Dani is not informed of this trip at all. When she tries to discuss with Christian, ask him why he didn't just tell her, he tries to leave, tries to emotionally distance himself again, even though Dani is completely within her right to be confused at why he wouldn't mention such a big trip, something that would take him out of the country for who knows how long. And in a moment of panic, Christian offers Dani to go with them, which his friends were not privy to until he already made the offer. Christian is shown to be a very self-centered person. He is a very selfish man. One of his friends, who is also an anthropology major, decides to study the commune that Pele grew up on as his final research paper, as his thesis, to which Christian decides to just do the same thing. It's easy, it's there, and when his friend rightfully is upset by this, feels betrayed by this, Christian shrugs him off, shuts down emotionally, tells him we'll see who writes the better paper, doesn't see how his actions cause consequence and hurts other people, which unfortunately leads to his downfall in the end. The only one of Christian's friends not upset at Danny's spontaneous joining of their group is Pele, the man who is from this commune and who feels a kinship with Danny because he lost his family too. The first time he tries to connect with Danny about this, she has a breakdown. The wounds have not scabbed over, haven't even begun to heal for her, and she has to take time to herself. There's a beautiful transition scene of her running to their bathroom at their apartment, transforming into the bathroom of an airplane as they all go to Sweden together. I want to talk about the framing of Sweden and the cult in general. All the shots we get in America are very urban, claustrophobic. They are not whimsical in any way, shape, or form. They are average and everyday. But you get to Sweden, you get to the Haga, you see these beautiful rolling fields, this place that seems almost ethereal, almost enchanted, something that could take place in the Lord of the Rings, a realm of the Fae. There is one scene when they are about to go to the Haga, which is the name of this cult, to their commune, where they are offered a mushroom tea, a hallucinogenic, which this movie, from all the people I know that have done hallucinogenics, says has the greatest representation of what doing hallucinogenics looks like. Danny doesn't want to take any mind-altering substances at that moment, and she, instead of being portrayed as a person with her own agency, is portrayed as a Debbie Downer, as someone who is ruining the vibe of the party because she won't partake. Her saying politely and calmly, "No, I don't want to," then makes Christian say no, which Danny did not ask him to stay sober with her. Danny even encourages him to take a ride with his friends. For some reason, though, whether it be manipulation or whether him thinking he has to not do drugs with her, it pushes her to just take the trip, even though she doesn't feel she's emotionally ready to do so. I can't say for certain whether or not Christian guilted her into this on purpose, or, like I said, if he truly believed he was doing what he was supposed to as her boyfriend. All I know is that it resulted in Danny being ridiculed by his friends for not partaking with them. Like I said, Danny is a person that is terrified of being alone, and she is a person that falls for peer pressure, which just shows you how this story will end. The next scene is quite sad. Danny runs off by herself. She's distressed at the mention of family. One of Christian's friends is high and mumbling how they're all his family, and Danny emotionally can't handle this. She runs and gets scared by a hallucination. There are people also on hallucinogenics laughing, and she thinks they're laughing at her. And instead of Christian being the one to come to her to talk her down, it's Pele. Pele's the one that runs after her, gets her, says they've been laughing this whole time, they're not laughing at you. Danny passes out, and the way she's woken up is incredibly condescending. It reminds me of some of my own exes, which is why on the first watch through, this movie really did trick me into rooting for the cult. She wakes up and she says, "Is it morning?" And Christian's response, instead of saying yes, instead of getting on her level, because she's on the ground, says, "Well, by yesterday's standpoint." Which to some might not mean a lot, but to many it does mean something. He's standing over her, this poor woman who's been through the ringer through life, who he's emotionally distanced himself from, who is staying in a relationship with her even though he knows it's bad for both of them, who he knows is incredibly emotional and codependent. Instead of waking her up with any sort of love or care, he wakes her up with a condescending remark. Next is the track to the Harga, and if you thought the first scene was whimsical and ethereal, this one makes you feel like you have been pulled into a fantasy novel. The sun is bright, it's shimmering, flowers are swaying in the breeze and blooming. There's this gorgeous music that is also within the realm of the story as a whole. It's not the soundtrack, it's the Harga themselves playing these beautiful tunes, welcoming people to their commune with open arms. We then see one of the prophets of the Harga, this boy that has physical mutations due to being bred incestuously. You see him violently coloring. There's no fanfare, no dramatic boom, no slow zoom in, no character even really acknowledging him. He's there, he's a part of the Harga, and you don't learn later what his grand purpose is. He's just there to remind you that this cult, while gorgeous and beautiful, isn't all what it seems. I want to talk about Pele. Pele is supposed to be Christian's friend, but you can tell that he is absolutely more interested in Danny. Pele is the antithesis of Christian. Where Christian tells Danny to hide her trauma and pain, Pele tells her to openly express it. When Danny is distraught, Pele goes to her, where Christian tells her to go off on her own and deal with it herself. It's hard not to love him. He seems so sweet and genuine and kind, which makes him incredibly dangerous. There is a point where Danny wants to leave. She sees the Atastupa ceremony where people commit ritualistic suicide when they reach a certain age, sees a man's head get caved in and one woman splatter on a ceremonial rock. She's distressed, distraught, PTSD coming back, and Pele goes to her. Christian had sent her off on her own, but Pele, he goes to her, he talks to her, and he redirects the discussion. Instead of discussing how he understands why Danny's upset by what she saw, especially seeing as how Christian, full knowing what the ceremony was, did not warn her, he instead redirects it to talk about her family, her loss, how he lost too and wanted her to be a part of his family. That he had never felt alone because he had the Harga, he had the cult. And wouldn't it be so great if she had the cult too? People to always love her, let her cry on their shoulder, let her express herself. The Atastupa ceremony was incredibly sad to watch. All of Christian's friends, including Pele, knew what she went through. And they knew what the Atastupa ceremony meant. Possibly not Mark, one of his cruder friends who doesn't seem to be an anthropology major, but definitely Pele, definitely Christian, and most certainly Josh. Josh, knowing what Danny went through, even had the audacity to smile and laugh when he heard that it was an Atastupa ceremony. And when Danny turns to Christian to ask him, what is it? He doesn't tell her. He, full knowing her trauma, lets her see something so grisly. Now, mind you, this wasn't something I caught till my second viewing. I mentioned how at the end of the movie, Danny is alone except for the Harga, but she was alone to begin with. None of Christian's friends, except for Pele, have any interest in Danny. Mark openly mocks her, openly hates her even being on the trip with them, complains about it incessantly. Josh, while not as actively malicious as Mark, doesn't tell this girl he knows lost her entire family that they're about to witness a ritual involving people killing themselves. And Christian is the worst offender. He's in a romantic entanglement with this woman and doesn't have the decency to think about her emotional needs or mental state. When she is distressed after witnessing it, he pushes her away physically, verbally, and emotionally. Tells her to go off, take her own time. When she's alone and contemplating the grass, he goes to her and tells her to keep an open mind about the Harga, not knowing that a lot of his actions are inciting his own doom. There's even a scene where Pele, a man that, in all honesty, shouldn't really know this information, knows that it's Danny's birthday, even has to remind Christian about it. Pele draws her this beautiful picture of herself in a flower crown, and Danny is entranced. Meanwhile, Christian finds a cake and a candle and can't even really light it. Now, I know I've talked a lot about Christian, and I want to get into what happens to Christian. If you don't know, towards the end of this movie, Christian is drugged and forced to take part in a ritualistic breeding thing. I don't know how to explain it. Essentially, this girl that has been making eyes at Christian throughout the whole movie wants him to be the one to take her virginity and to impregnate her for the good of the cult. Like I said, they use incest as a way to create their oracles, to create their leaders of their religious movement. So they don't like having the pot being too homogenous, although they are very particular about who exactly they allow to breed within the cult. People have to go to the elders to be chosen. Mind you, the cult uses hallucinogenics as a way to open their minds, but also to control people. Christian, while high, is told that he has been chosen to allow to have sex with this girl. He is then given more drugs and sent into a hut. At the same time this is going on, Danny has been crowned the May Queen because she won the dance in a way that seems like maybe the odds were stacked in her favor to win by the other contestants. Just saying. And she is also under the influence of their special blend of tea. After becoming May Queen, she goes to plant the first plant of the summer. She is then being driven back when she hears the noises coming from the hut that Christian is in. She sees what he's doing and she is rightfully heartbroken. Now, through her eyes, he was not drugged and taken advantage of by the cult. In her eyes, he is consensually having sex with this girl. She's heartbroken, she's crying, she's screaming. All the girls that are a part of her little May Queen parade come and they comfort her, they hold her, they let her scream and wail, they even take part in her suffering. Where Christian in the beginning was robotically stroking her shoulder and back, these women are openly hugging her, openly crying with her, letting her express her emotions and self. Once Christian finishes and has post-nut clarity, he realizes what just happened and he runs out of the ritual site. He finds the bodies of people he had come here with, his friends, others, and he realizes what's happening. He's then knocked out and drugged once more. I don't think it's actively stated what the Harga give him, but it essentially paralyzes him. He's still awake, though. He looks up and he sees Danny covered in these gorgeous flowers. Singularly, they're beautiful, but the way they're placed on her is almost suffocating, drowning in the beauty of the Harga. She's made to choose between Christian, an outsider, and another man to be the final sacrifice for their ritual. The worst thing is, Christian can't plead with Danny. He has no say, no sway over her anymore. And at the moment he needs his words most, he needs to open up to her the most, he's unable to. The choice stripped from him as it was before, and he's placed inside the hut and burned alive with the other sacrifices. There was a scene that a lot of people made fun of in this movie, and that is the fact that two of the members of the cult are chosen to be sacrificed alongside the outsiders that were brought in, alongside Christian. They are offered a syrup from the yew tree to not feel the pain of them being burned alive. I remember watching the scene with my friends and how everyone began laughing as the men started to scream. And some people thought it was a continuity error. My own wife looked at me and said, "So much for a yew tree," but upon my second viewing, it clicked for me. It clicked that all of the promises the Harga made about it not being painful or terrible were a lie. The cult doesn't just lie to outsiders, it lies to their own people about the suffering they will have to face. I saw that as the ultimate betrayal. They already manufactured something that would make Dani emotionally destroyed. Already manufactured her being and feeling abandoned by everyone she came here with. And they even abandoned their own people to die a horrible death in a shed. You see the Harga wailing, but they don't actually feel the pain that their members are feeling, that the people in the huts are feeling. It's pretend. Like how they pretended to feel when they were all holding Dani, wrapping their arms around her and letting her express her emotions. You see Dani lumbering around in this bouquet of flowers, lurching like a monster as she screams and cries. And then she smiles. There's many ways to read Dani's smile at the end of Midsommar. I personally always read it as acceptance. Acceptance that she can never go back to who she was or where she's from, and that the cult probably won't let her. My wife told me how, in one variation of the script, the smile was a sign of madness. I also read how some critics saw the smile as relief. There are people that heavily romanticize this movie, and I understand why. It's hard not to. This poor girl who's all alone in the world finds a family in a place that seems so beautiful and dreamlike. But it's not. By the end of the story, every person Dani comes with is dead. We don't even know if she still has her original clothes or passports. She is completely cut off from the outside world. Her family is dead, and it doesn't look like she had any extended family she was close to. There would be no one to look for her, no one to check up on her. She might not have even have told people where she was going. Her school gave her leniency in her studies. When Dani ends the film, she is with the Harga, but she is entirely alone. When I first watched this movie, I did think it was a fairy tale, that it was a romance, a triumph, a breakup movie. But now I see how visceral the horror truly is. It's a horror movie that convinced us to root for the monster. That convinced us that the final girl was truly safe in its claws. In short, this movie is a masterpiece, and I highly recommend, if you haven't, that you go watch it. If you like this video, please consider giving it a like, maybe commenting, and hit subscribe. Tell me what you think of this new format of doing a speed paint about the topic I'm covering, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye!